Welcome. Tonight, we do more than just tell a story. We will drift back through the mists of time, not with the sharp lens of a historian, but with the soft focus of a dreamer. Take a deep, gentle breath with me now, and let the sounds of your world begin to fade. And as we prepare to tell her story, I have a small, warm invitation for you. If you enjoy these gentle journeys into the past, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to share them with you. It would also bring me such joy to see when and where you are joining from. Please feel free to leave a comment below with your city and the time on your clock. It's a beautiful way to see our quiet community stretching across the world. Thank you for being here. Our journey begins not with a ship, but with an idea born from the grand ambitions of a gilded age. In the early 1900s, the North Atlantic was a stage for a magnificent rivalry. The great shipping lines were the titans of their day, and their flagships were symbols of national pride and technological might. The competition was fierce, particularly between Great Britain's Cunard Line and the White Star Line. Cunard had just launched two revolutionary vessels, the Lusitania and the Mauretania. They were marvels of speed, sleek greyhounds of the sea that captured the coveted blue riband, the prize for the fastest Atlantic crossing. They were fast, but the chairman of the White Star Line, J. Bruce Ismay, dreamed of something different. One evening, in a quiet London mansion, Ismay sat down to dinner with Lord Peary, the man who controlled Harland and Wolff, the legendary Belfast shipyard. Over fine food and quiet conversation, a new vision was formed. They would not try to beat Cunard at their own game of speed. Instead, they would create a new class of vessel, so large, so stable, and so breathtakingly luxurious that they would make speed irrelevant. Passengers wouldn't choose their ships to save a few hours. They would choose them for an experience, for a journey that was itself the destination. They would build a trio of sisters, three giants to dominate the Atlantic route. They would be called the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Gigantic. This was not just a plan to build ships. It was a promise to create floating palaces, paragons of comfort and elegance, designed to give passengers the feeling of staying in a fine European hotel rather than being at sea. This was the quiet promise that led to the creation of the world's grandest ship. A story of soft wonders and human ingenuity. The story of a vessel that was more than just a ship. She was a dream. Her name was Titanic. It was the year 1909. The world was changing, yet in a gentle way. The rhythms of a new century were settling in. Trains moved steadily across vast lands, their distant whistles a lullaby. Great ships were beginning to cross the oceans, carrying dreams and hopes with them. Cities, like patient gardens, grew slowly, reaching for the electric bulbs that now lit their streets with a soft, warm glow. Telegraphs whispered messages across countries, their quiet clicks connecting faraway places, and factories breathed soft clouds of steam into the air, a sign of invention and quiet progress. It was a moment when the future felt bright and vast. In the bustling shipyards of Belfast, Ireland, a truly grand dream was taking shape. At Harland and Wolff, the air was thick with the scent of hot metal, coal smoke, and the damp Irish Sea. This was no ordinary shipyard. It was a city of construction, a place where 15,000 men, an entire community, came together each day to build the largest moving objects ever created by human hands. To even begin, they had to rebuild the shipyard itself. A massive new gantry, a colossal scaffold of steel beams nearly 230 feet high, was constructed over the slipways where the sisters Olympic and Titanic would be born side by side. The local people called it the Great Gantry, and it dominated the Belfast skyline, a cathedral of steel where these new titans would be worshipped into existence. The first step was laying the keel, the great steel spine of the ship, on the last day of March, 1909. Imagine that first vast plate of steel lowered carefully into place, the beginning of a legend. From this spine, a colossal rib cage began to grow. Day by day, week by week, thousands of steel frames were heated in furnaces until they glowed a cherry red, then bent into their precise curved shapes by teams of skilled men using hammers and sheer strength. Then came the skin. Hundreds of immense steel plates, each weighing several tons, were lifted high into the air by cranes, dangling like giant leaves before being fitted into place. And this is where the sound of Belfast was born, the deafening, rhythmic chorus of the riveting gangs. A team of 4 men worked in a perilous, high-stakes ballet. One, the heater, would pull a white-hot rivet from a small portable furnace. With a flick of his tongs, he would toss it through the air, sometimes 50 or 60 feet, where the catcher would snag it in a metal bucket. He'd knock out the ash, place the glowing rivet into its hole, and the other 2 men, the holder-on and the basher, would hammer it tight, one from each side, their synchronized blows creating that ceaseless, echoing clang. All day long, this sound was the heartbeat of the shipyard. 3 million times this dance was repeated, 3 million small, crucial promises binding the ship together, making her strong. They were building more than a vessel. They were building a belief in their own craft, a testament to their skill. Human hands with immense care and gentle pride brought a dream to life. After 2 years, the great hull was complete, a black mountain of steel waiting for the sea. The launch, on May 31st, 1911, was a city-wide celebration. Thousands gathered to watch. To help the massive structure slide, 22 tons of soap and tallow were smeared over the slipway. With a series of small, cracking sounds from the supporting timbers, she began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, gliding majestically into the waters of Belfast Lough. She was not yet the ship of dreams. She was a hollow giant, an empty canvas, but she was afloat. Now began the second act of her creation, the fitting out. For the next 10 months, she was a hive of activity. 1,000 carpenters, electricians, plumbers, artists, and craftsmen swarmed over her. They laid miles of intricate wiring and plumbing. They paneled the walls with exquisitely carved oak, sycamore, and mahogany. They laid down lush carpets and intricate tile work. They installed the 4 colossal funnels, each one large enough to drive 2 locomotives through. "It's a little secret," whispered by history. that only 3 of those majestic funnels were truly functional. The 4th, a dummy funnel, was added purely for beauty and balance, a touch of elegant design that simply made her look more perfect. It also served a practical purpose, housing ventilation shafts and kitchens. Her name, Titanic, was painted on her bow and stern in elegant gold letters, each one a beacon of the grand journeys she promised. And when she was finally complete, she was a true giant of gentle grace. Her hull, painted a deep matte black, descended into the waters where a vibrant anti-fouling red paint protected her from the sea, a striking contrast. Her broad decks, scrubbed and wholly stoned, gleamed a pure white under the often gray Irish sky. To step inside was to enter another world. The designer's goal was to make passengers forget they were on a ship at all. The grand staircase was her heart. It descended through 7 of her 10 decks, crafted from polished oak and adorned with intricate wrought iron grills. At its head, on the A-deck landing, was a magnificent clock, a carved panel depicting honor and glory crowning time. Light poured in from a huge glass and iron dome high above, illuminating the entire space with a soft, ethereal glow. The first-class lounge was a masterpiece of French style, with high-arched windows and exquisitely carved wooden panels. The reading and writing room was a quiet, serene space reserved for ladies, decorated in soft, light colors. The smoking room, a male preserve, was a grand, club-like space with dark mahogany paneling, stained glass windows, and a real coal-burning fireplace, one of the very few on any ship at the time. There was the Veranda Cafe, with its climbing ivy and wicker furniture designed to feel like a sun-drenched terrace. There was the Turkish bath complex, an ornate tiled world of steam rooms, hot rooms, and cooling rooms, like something out of a storybook. And deep within the ship, there was even a heated swimming pool, a true novelty, a secret oasis of calm where gentle waves lapped in quiet rhythm. Even for the less wealthy, she offered unprecedented comfort. Second-class accommodations were as good as first class on many other liners. They had their own elegant dining saloon, library, and smoking room. And down in third class, yes, even steerage, passengers found themselves not in the usual crowded dormitories, but in clean, private cabins with 2 to 10 bunks. They had their own dining rooms and were served proper meals, a luxury unheard of for most. After a series of successful sea trials, where she performed flawlessly, she was ready, and so Titanic waited quietly in the port of Southampton. Her immense presence cast a gentle shadow over the docks. Her dreams, those of her creators, mingled softly with the dreams of the people who would soon step aboard, ready to begin their own new chapters. There was an anticipation in the air, a quiet, humming excitement. On the bright, cool morning of April 10th, 1912, the air was crisp and clear, filled with the promise of spring. The sky stretched wide above the port of Southampton, a pale, calm blue. Families and travelers from all walks of life gathered at the docks, their faces a mix of quiet excitement and gentle nerves. A new chapter was about to begin. The port smelled of salt and a faint, sweet scent of coal smoke, mingling with the fresh fragrance of spring flowers carried on the breeze from the nearby New Forest. The waves lapped softly against the dock, a rhythmic, calming sound, and gulls cried gently overhead, a familiar maritime melody. The ship was a city, and its population was gathering. There was Colonel John Jacob Astor, one of the wealthiest men in the world, returning from his honeymoon with his young, pregnant wife, Madeline. There was the industrialist Benjamin Guggenheim and the Denver millionaire Margaret "Molly" Brown. There was W.T. Stead, a famous journalist and spiritualist. And there, too, were the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, and the White Star Line's chairman, J. Bruce Ismay, both aboard to witness their creation's maiden voyage. But for every famous name, there were 100 others. In second class, there were teachers, clerks, and small business owners, families on holiday, their comfortable cabins a source of quiet delight. And in third class, there were hundreds of hopeful souls, a family from Sweden with their 5 young children, a group of Irish friends from the same village, a Syrian woman hoping to reunite with her husband in Pennsylvania. They clutched simple bags and looked up at the great ship with eyes wide with wonder, their dreams of a new life in America shining brightly. Among the eager faces was a young boy named Samuel, his eyes sparkling as he gazed up at the great ship, her dark hull rising like a mountain. "Papa," he whispered, his voice full of awe, "is she really as big as a castle?" His father smiled gently, a soft crinkle at the corners of his eyes. "Bigger," he said. "Bigger than anything you've ever seen, my boy." At noon, the whistles blew, great deep bellows that echoed across the city. As the powerful tugboats began to pull the giant ship away from the dock, a near disaster occurred. The massive displacement of water from Titanic's hull sucked in a smaller liner, the SS New York, moored nearby. Her ropes snapped with a sound like cannon shots, and she drifted helplessly, stern first, toward the Titanic. The Titanic was so incredibly vast that she made 3 stops to gather her passengers. She sailed first to Cherbourg, France, arriving as dusk fell, her thousands of portholes twinkling like a floating constellation. Here, more passengers, including Molly Brown and John Jacob Astor, came aboard from tenders. Then it was on to her final stop, Queenstown, now Cobh in Ireland. It was a beautiful, poignant scene. Small boats crowded with vendors selling Irish lace and souvenirs surrounded the ship. 123 more passengers, mostly young Irish emigrants, climbed aboard, while a handful of people disembarked, the last to ever leave the ship. A young apprentice photographer named Francis Brown took the last known photos of the ship and her life on board before getting off here. Now, with her full complement of passengers and crew, over 2,200 people, she turned her bow westward toward the open, endless ocean. For all aboard, she represented a journey into the unknown. Life aboard Titanic quickly settled into a rhythm of gentle pleasures and quiet discovery. The ship was so vast and so stable that it was easy to forget one was at sea at all. There was no vibration, only the faintest, deepest hum from the mighty engines far below, a reassuring, steady pulse. A day would begin with the sound of a bugle call, summoning first-class passengers to breakfast. In the grand dining saloon, they would be greeted with an astonishing array of choices, from oatmeal and herring to grilled mutton chops and omelets cooked to order. After breakfast, the day was their own. Gentlemen might retreat to the smoking room for a cigar and conversation, or head to the squash court for an energetic game, the soft thud of the ball echoing gently on the polished wood. Peaceful ladies might gather in the beautiful reading and writing room, its large windows overlooking the sea to catch up on correspondence, or simply read in peace. Others might enjoy a gentle swim in the heated pool, a secret oasis of calm, or visit the ship's gymnasium, with its curious mechanical horses and camels. Content for many, the simple pleasure was a stroll on the wide, open promenade deck. Wrapped in warm coats against the crisp Atlantic air, they would walk for miles, breathing in the clean, salty breeze, their gaze following the endless blue sea stretching to the horizon. Stewards would be on hand to offer cups of warm bouillon or tuck a woolen blanket around a passenger resting in a deck chair. Relaxed lunch was another grand affair, followed by a quiet afternoon. As the sun began to dip lower, the ship's band, 8 musicians of remarkable talent known as the Heroic Eight, would begin to play. Their soft, soothing music would drift from the lounges and over the decks like a lullaby, a perfect accompaniment to afternoon tea. In second class, life was just as comfortable, if slightly less grand. Families gathered in their cozy cabins, children played quietly on soft rugs, and their parents shared stories and laughter in their own library and dining saloon. They could read the Atlantic Daily Bulletin, the ship's own newspaper, printed on board each day with news received by wireless, stock prices, society gossip, and the daily menu. Down in third class, a vibrant, hopeful community thrived. In the evenings, the general room would be filled with music, as someone would bring out a fiddle or a set of pipes, and the songs of Ireland, Scandinavia, and the Levant would weave together in joyful harmony. They would tell stories of home and dream aloud of the new lives they were about to begin, their shared aspirations creating a powerful sense of warmth. As evening fell, the ship transformed. Electric lights cast a soft, warm glow everywhere. In first class, it was time to dress for dinner, the most formal ritual of the day. Ladies appeared in their finest gowns adorned with jewels, while gentlemen wore white tie and tails. Dinner was a multi-course spectacle, a testament to the skill of the 60 chefs and their assistants. After dinner, the orchestra would play a concert, and conversations would continue late into the night. Each day was marked by these soft sounds, the steady, hypnotic rhythm of the engines, the quiet call of a steward, the soft laughter of children, the gentle clinking of china, and always the gentle splash of waves against the hull, a constant, soothing lullaby. Days passed in a calm, soothing rhythm as the Titanic sailed westward, deeper into the vast, empty expanse of the Atlantic. Mornings broke slowly. The vast sky would paint itself in soft, dreamy pastel colors, gentle pinks, pale blues, and creamy whites, as the sun peeked over the horizon. Sometimes a pod of dolphins would appear, leaping joyfully in the ship's bow wave. Seagulls, those faithful companions of the coast, had long since disappeared, leaving the ship alone in her blue world. The sea itself seemed to stretch forever, sometimes smooth and shining like polished glass, at other times a deep royal blue capped with gentle white waves. Passengers wrote letters home on stationery embossed with the White Star flag, their pens scratching gently on paper, imagining their words reaching loved ones far away. Others simply watched the horizon, lost in quiet thought, letting the endless blue soothe their minds. At night, far from the light pollution of any city, the sky was a spectacle. It was a vast, dark velvet blanket sprinkled with countless stars, each one a tiny, sharp, distant light. The Milky Way stretched overhead in a brilliant, hazy band. Passengers would stand quietly on deck, wrapped in warm shawls, gazing at the constellations, feeling the profound immensity of the universe around them. It was a time of deep calm, a feeling of being held gently between the vast ocean below and the vast cosmos above. One evening, a little girl named Lily, her face illuminated by the soft glow from the deck, pressed her small hand to the cool rail, looking out over the dark, mesmerizing waves. "Is the sea alive, Mama?" she asked her mother softly, her voice barely a whisper. Her mother smiled, her eyes kind and gentle. "Yes, my dear, in its own way. It breathes slowly, like the ship, with a vast, deep breath, and it sings its own quiet song." On Sunday, April 14th, the 5th day of the voyage, the weather was beautiful but deceptively cold. The sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, and the sea was calm. A church service was held in the morning. The afternoon was spent relaxing. But as the day wore on, the temperature dropped sharply. The wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, began to receive ice warnings from other ships in the area. "Ice report, large icebergs," one message read. These messages were passed to the bridge, but on this busy Sunday, with the operators also handling a backlog of personal messages for the passengers, not every warning received the attention it deserved. The ship sailed on into the descending, freezing night. On the evening of April 14th, the ocean became unnaturally still. The air grew crisp and bitingly cold. This stillness, while peaceful, was also a subtle danger. The sea was flat calm, a rare condition with no gentle waves, no swell breaking at the base of an iceberg in a phosphorescent line to reveal its presence. They could silently loom, invisible in the dark. The moon had not yet risen, leaving the ocean in near total darkness. But the stars shone with incredible piercing brightness in the crisp, cold air, like diamonds scattered on black velvet. The sea stretched, black and smooth, a silent mirror to the heavens. The ship sailed steadily onward, her lights twinkling softly against the dark, tranquil water. A self-contained universe of warmth and light in the immense, freezing night. At 11:40 p.m., in the crow's nest high above the deck, lookout Frederick Fleet peered into the inky blackness. Suddenly, his heart froze. Far ahead, a shadow appeared, darker than the night itself. It grew larger with terrifying speed. It was an iceberg, massive and silent, like a frozen mountain drifting in the dark. He rang the warning bell, clang, 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 3 sharp, clear rings, the signal for iceberg dead ahead. He grabbed the phone to the bridge. "Iceberg right ahead!" he shouted. On the bridge, First Officer Murdoch gave urgent orders. "Hard a starboard," he commanded, turning the wheel to port. He rang the engine room telegraph, ordering full reverse, hoping to slow the ship's immense momentum. For a few agonizing seconds, the ship seemed to hang in time. Then her bow began to slowly, gracefully turn left. It seemed she might just miss it, but she was too large, too fast. She couldn't turn in time. The iceberg's sharp, frozen underwater spur scraped along the starboard side of the Titanic. The sound was not a violent crash, as many might imagine. On the bridge, it was a faint grinding, ripping noise. For most passengers, it was a gentle, almost imperceptible shudder. Some thought a propeller blade had broken. Others described it as a sound like canvas tearing, or 1,000 marbles rolling down a deck. It was so subtle that many dismissed it and went back to sleep. But in the boiler rooms deep below, the reality was immediate and terrifying. Seawater, brutally cold, roared through a series of gashes in the hull. The silent, vast iceberg had ruptured 300 feet of the ship's side, breaching not 1, not 2, but 5 of her 16 watertight compartments. She was designed to stay afloat with 4 flooded, but 5 was her death sentence. The water began to pour in, and the great ship, her gentle dream, was quietly, irrevocably doomed. Though the iceberg had delivered a fatal blow, the mood on board remained surprisingly calm for a time. But below decks, the truth was dawning. Passengers in the forward cabins woke to the strange feeling of cold seawater seeping under their doors. Crew members, moving with quiet efficiency, began to knock gently on cabin doors. "Put on your life belts and come up to the boat deck." Up on deck, the scene was surreal. The air was freezing, but the band had begun to play cheerful, jaunery ragtime tunes meant to prevent panic. Some passengers, still not grasping the danger, found small pieces of ice that had been scraped onto the deck. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, was seen moving calmly through the ship, his blueprints in his hand, assessing the damage. He quickly confirmed to Captain Smith the heartbreaking truth. The ship had, at best, 2 hours to live. She would sink. The captain gave the order to uncover the lifeboats and begin loading the women and children. The wireless operators began sending out the distress signal, first the traditional CQD and then the newer SOS, one of the first times it was ever used. The sound of steam escaping from the funnels, a loud, deafening hiss, began to fill the air. This was a necessary safety measure, but it added to the eerie, surreal atmosphere. Amidst this, a quiet heroism began to emerge. The musicians, led by Wallace Hartley, moved to the boat deck and continued to play, not frantic music, but soft, soothing melodies and hymns, a final, beautiful lullaby to the night. These 8 men, true heroes, would play on for over 2 hours, their gentle strains drifting across the deck, a symbol of courage and grace in the face of the unthinkable. Slowly, gently, the lifeboats were lowered one by one into the dark, incredibly cold sea. There were only enough lifeboats for about half the people on board, a stark reality based on the outdated maritime regulations of the time. This quiet fact hung in the air. The process was orderly but full of confusion. Many passengers were reluctant to leave the apparent safety of the huge, well-lit ship for a small, dark boat on the freezing ocean. The first lifeboat to leave, with a capacity of 65, was lowered with only 28 people aboard. The Women and Children First protocol was largely followed, leading to heartbreaking scenes of farewell. Acts of quiet courage and tender goodbyes unfolded in the soft, hushed night. Isidore and Ida Strauss, elderly owners of Macy's department store, were among them. Ida was offered a seat in a lifeboat, but gently refused, famously saying, "We have lived together for many years. Where you go, I go." They chose to remain together, an enduring testament to love. John Jacob Astor IV, one of the wealthiest men on board, calmly helped his pregnant wife, Madeleine, into a lifeboat, then stepped back, a final, selfless act. The water was quiet, almost eerily still, and the cold night wrapped around them like a soft, dark blanket. Even as the great ship began to list more severely, as her thousands of lights flickered and then, one by one, faded into darkness, she remained calm in her final moments. She was a sleeping giant, slowly, gently slipping beneath the waves. The ship's bow dipped lower and lower. The remaining passengers and crew moved steadily aft. Then the stern, Her massive propellers, now fully exposed to the air, began to rise, silhouetted majestically against the vast star-strewn sky. The ship reached towards the heavens in a final grand, silent farewell. For a moment she hung there, a dark tower against the stars. Then, with an almost imperceptible groan, a deep, final sigh, she began her gentle, slow slip beneath the waves, disappearing into the dark, cold embrace of the ocean. It was 2:20 a.m. Not a crash, but a soft, profound descent. And the great ship was gone. In her place was a quiet, terrible darkness, the sound of over 1,000 voices in the freezing water, and the scattered lights of the few lifeboats. Hours later, in the biting cold dawn, a new presence appeared on the horizon, a single light. It was the Cunard liner Carpathia. Her captain, Arthur Rostron, a deeply religious and decisive man, had received the Titanic's distress call just after midnight. He had immediately turned his ship around and began a desperate race against time, pushing his vessel to its absolute limits, carefully navigating through the same ice field that had doomed the Titanic. He ordered his own ship prepared to receive survivors, with blankets, hot coffee, soup, and doctors all standing by. The Carpathia came close, her crew working gently and methodically, gathering the just over 700 survivors from the lifeboats. They were wrapped in warm, thick blankets, offered nourishing food, and spoken to with kind, comforting words, their voices soft against the vastness of the sea. Though the majestic Titanic had gone, the memories of her and the gentle lessons she offered lived on, in the quiet stories shared, the dreams she had inspired, and the lives she had forever touched. Some remarkable small lives survived too, including Milvina Dean, the youngest passenger, just 2 months old at the time. She would become the last living survivor, a quiet link to that distant night, before her passing many years later. And a quiet curiosity, 3 dogs also remarkably survived, carried to safety in the lifeboats, a small comfort amidst the immense loss. Carpathia sailed to New York, where news of the disaster had created a state of shock and disbelief. When she arrived at Pier 54, tens of thousands of people waited in the pouring rain, a silent, grieving crowd. The world was changed. The Titanic story, though tinged with immense sadness, became a powerful symbol. It reminded the world of the immense power of nature, but also the enduring strength and fragility of the human spirit. Most importantly, this quiet, poignant event led to profound and immediate changes in maritime safety. The very next year, the first International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea was held. 24-hour radio watches became mandatory on all large ships, ensuring no more distress calls would be missed. And all ships were required to carry enough lifeboats for every single person on board, a gentle but critical shift that ensured no one would ever be left without a place of safety again. The International Ice Patrol was established, and to this day, it guards the shipping lanes of the North Atlantic. For decades, the great ship rested in her silent, dark abyss. Then, in 1985, an expedition led by Dr. Robert Ballard finally discovered the silent wreck of the Titanic, lying peacefully in 2 sections on the dark ocean floor, 2.5 miles down. She was a vast, quiet memorial, being slowly reclaimed by the sea, a testament to her enduring, heartbreaking presence. Thank you for being here and for sailing through this story with me. If you've reached this point and you're still awake, first of all, you're amazing. And second, I'd love to know, what story would you like to hear next? Let me know in the comments, and maybe your idea will guide our next quiet journey. Until then, sleep well, and see you in the next story.